Kia ora. Good evening. Well, welcome to this presentation where we are the Coding Night uh, user group. And tonight we are part of the Global Azure event that's happening. In general, we have like catch-ups on Monday nights, but today, because of the Global Azure event, we're just doing like this night, and we're gonna have like another session Saturday. So my name is Marcel Medina, and tonight we're going to be talking about migrating ARM templates to Bicep, right? So if you have been working with ARM templates, you know that now for sure that Bicep is taking over, and with legacy ARM templates, you at some stage you need to migrate them. And on this session, I hope I provide some steps on how you can do it. Let me just share my screen because I have the slides on the other screen on my computer. Yep, and that's working. All right, just introduce myself. So as I said, my name is Marcel Medina. I'm a software developer and Azure specialist. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and Azure architect. Uh, I've been like on the field for some years, and I feel that like now that I have been working for some years really in the market. I feel like well positioned. I feel that's my opinion that I'm well positioned to help others to learn about Azure and Microsoft technologies. I'm also like a playground enthusiast and coder, just because I'm also co-founder of playgokids.com, which is a mobile app focused for like families with kids. It's about like playgrounds in New Zealand and in the world. Currently working as a lead developer in my food bag. And my technical blog is tech.playgokids.com. Like just quickly go with like the user group, what we are, right? So we are a community like of developers that love coding and follow best practices, right? In software development languages and technologies. And if you're, it's the first time you're joining, uh, well, this session, or so just you know that we are focused like on development. So this is a developer user group. Right? The main intent is to enable developers with practical knowledge to excel and launch their careers. Right? So if you are interested in developments and DevOps, right? So this is a group for you to join and help really. Yeah, we're very open to sessions and anyone that want like to share like some content with the user group. Also tonight we're going to explore like some tools on how you can do the migration from ARM to Bicep. We're going to explore phased migration. That's Microsoft has provided some guidelines, and we're going to go like in details on how we can do that migration and demos. Right? So for each stage, we're going to see how we're going to take like an existing old legacy ARM template, and we're going to go like through this phase, improve, convert to Bicep, and refactor the solution, and doing like some testing and follow like best practices until we get to productionize these new templates. So let's get going, right? With the Bicep tools, um, what we're trying to do in here is just setting up an environment, right? So we have like some tooling that's important for us to before start doing any migration to have installed in our computer, right? So to start with the VS Code in the Bicep extension, right? So there is an extension for Visual Studio Codes that we can use. It's pretty good. It provides like um, some guidance on things that are not right, right? And it does like some mapping for you of like the resources when like you're converting uh, the ARM onto Bicep. In the installation of the Azure CLI or the PowerShell, right? Depending on what machine you are, like on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you can install like the Azure CLI in PowerShell, like depending if you like on Windows or um, yeah, I think it's just a matter of preference. I prefer the Azure CLI, and the examples I'm gonna show follow that. I'd like just to show like the bicep. I think that's the one. So in here, right? So that's my Visual Studio codes. If you look at the extensions, right? We have like uh, different tools. So we're talking like about migrating the ARM. So for that, it's important you have like this, the Azure Resource Manager tool installed like in your Visual Studio codes. It's also important that you have like the bicep extension, right? So that's going to provide you like the intelligence for you to work on Visual Studio Code. But if you want like more than that, more comprehensive set of tools, you could go with the Azure tools, right? And the Azure tools provide like it's a pack, right? And that contains multiple extensions, right? Azure App Service, Azure Functions, storage, database, VMs, resources, right? That's the one that, oops, kind of this one. This one contains the ARM, but you have like resource, the CLI tools. So the ARM template comes with that, and the Bicep extension also comes with that. So in general, like go with the Azure tools, you have like everything in one single place. Having like Docker, Azure pipelines in the ARM template viewer, which is interesting too. I think like I can just like go like with the solution. The solution here, I'm just gonna share like the GitHub path, but this is the example we're gonna follow. Yeah, we're gonna see how it works, right? Um, in general, like with the old legacy ARM templates, if you were working as a developer, you would just start like on Visual Studio, create like the solution in the project. You would have like those sort of the boilerplate, right, created on Visual Studio, and then you would just customize in creating the resource, right? I think like what we have in here, what was the ARM template viewer is this one. It's pretty cool. Like it shows you the components you have. So on this solution, as you can see, we're gonna have a hosting plan, a web app, and app insights. That's basically it. It's just like a simple example showing how we can migrate, right, the ARM to Bicep. But yeah, this is a viewer that comes with Azure Tools extension. Have a look. It's pretty good. I think like it helps you take some screenshots and put like in those diagrams into documents. Right. Let me just come back to the presentation. And like more details are available on this link that's recorded, and you can view the video at any time. And so yeah, Microsoft provides like the links to the installation to the Azure CLI in where you can do it like well through an installer or manually do it. So they provide like a very comprehensive installation guide. And then we start like with the migration phase, right? So after having the tooling, we can start looking at how to do that migration. So it starts like with the conversion of the, let me show like the other picture here. So it starts in here like with the source. You're gonna get like from, could be from Azure, you extract like a JSON, and then you're gonna use as your start point, where you're gonna to convert, you're gonna get like the Bicep file, read only, because it's used like for references, rather than using this converted file, you're gonna take as a baseline for what comes next. But you're not gonna use that. You're gonna create a new one, and then you're gonna start migrating uh, the resource onto this new Bicep file. With that, once you get to migrate the resource, then we start refactoring, right? Looking at applying like best practices. And then you get like to the final Bicep file. And with that, you need to plan like for testing, right? There is like this what if conditions that you can check um, with like Bicep. That, for example, if you have like resources on Azure, so you could just run a command that checks against Azure without modifying the resource in there. So you can compare if things are similar or not, and take a decision, right, from that. And after you've done that in a test environment, you can go like to production, right? There are like some steps as well in production to minimize risks, right? And yeah, that's very well documented, right, on this resource. I put like the link at the bottom as well. Okay, let's explore like phase by phase, right? So phase one, where we're doing the conversion. So the goal is to capture an initial representation of your Azure resources and convert to Bicep. You could have like those resource, um, the JSON available for you on a repository, which is much straightforward if you start with that. But if you don't have, you could go like to Azure, grab what was deployed, check like the extract the resource. You could do it manually, or you could do like, let me see here. I think it's the next step in here, where we're capturing this representation of the resource. So Visual Studio Code allows you to use like this resource called bicep insert resource. And with that, you're basically connecting to your Azure subscription, and you are just retrieving. In this example here, I'm using a resource group to bring like just like that sort of information. But it's interesting that as soon as you provide the detail of the resource you want to retrieve, you're gonna get like the file created with a JSON in the body, right, from what's production currently. So it's going to extract that document, the JSON file for you. So that's a way for you to grab like the JSON resource if you don't have it on your own repository. Right? I have like references to that on this link that's available at the bottom. And after you have like the JSON initial the JSON file, what you need to do is basically convert to Bicep, like an initial representation. And what we need to do is just like it's decompile, right? Because we have the Azure, the Bicep CLI. So you could just run that, like az bicep decompile the dash file in Azure deploy.json is the file that I have, right? I think with that, we can just do like another, you can see like before I jump to the demo that I want to show, but you can see we have warnings, and those warnings, they are there because it's not like a perfect conversion, right? And there's going to be like a lot of warnings, right? So that's expected. So if I was to go and share like my screen here, let me just come back to that. All right. So we have like this existing arm template, and that's a JSON, like it's not a bicep. So I'm gonna run that command, and then I can see what's in there. Let me see here. I had like the command open before. Let me go to an existing ARM templates. That's what we have in there. And I'm just going to run the command. Just a minute. Just grab that. And the file is the Azure deploy JSON. Let me run this one. You're gonna see, just observing here, that's gonna create a new bicep file, right? So it has created, and you can see the number of warnings that we have in there, right? Yeah, so it's not perfect, but it helps you getting an initial version of the bicep. That's what I have. Let me just change the color in here. So I have like a customized one, but that's what you get, like the vanilla Visual Studio Code. And you can see like some warnings. We're gonna see how we can do the transition to that. I'm just gonna come back to the presentation and we see like the next steps. Right, we have like the link to where you can find the commands when we're doing the migration, right? So the goal in here is to create your first draft. I'm gonna have the first draft of the bicep and ensure that it defines all the Azure resource in scope. So we converted what was from ARM, and now you're going to migrate. You're not going to use that file. You're going to create a new file and do the migration. Let's see like the steps in here. So we're going to create a new empty bicep file. We're going to copy the resource from the decompile template. And we need to identify any sort of missing resource and recreate that. Right? I'm gonna jump back to the my Visual Studio Codes. Let's create like a new file in here. I'm gonna call Azure deploy demo.bicep. All right, let me create this one. So that's empty. I'm gonna preserve what's the initial one. That's my baseline. And I'm gonna copy, right? So I'm gonna have like this, uh, the file for me like to start and doing the manipulations. We have like well, phase two was to do like this copy, right? Where we just go like to do the migration. And then phase three would be refactoring. I'm gonna, considering that we are now here, I'm gonna start doing like some refactoring, and then we come back to the slides to see like in details what they represent, right? But when I look in here at the file, first thing I'm gonna look, right, are the variables, right, the parameters coming. They look all right. They seem to be in here, all of them. You can compare like with the previous. Um, so like you have like the previous Azure deploy, right? So you have the environment, hosting plan, SKU. We have like other variables, but that seems a pretty good conversion where we have like the initial parameters. One of the things I would just keep an eye is that first thing, make sure that the resources you are pointing leverage the latest APIs, right? This one is from 2015. If you look, oops, let's look at seeing what's the latest, right? Because I'm leveraging the Bicep Tools on Visual Studio Code, the intelligence comes automatically, right? First thing, like we need to update those API references. 2015, right? Let's change that. That's old. Let's grab the latest, 2021. This one as well, 2014. Let's replace. All right, let's grab what's the latest one, 2020. Okay, then second check. Let's see the warnings. We still have like some warnings in here. Like for example, this use a parameter here instead of this. Right, so we can start like creating and sorting the file. So this one is location. Let me create. So we specify the parent location, the type string should be equal. Let me copy this. All right, so we have the location here. What I can do, I can just come and replace, and we're just eliminating those warnings, right? All right, so we have like first here, like the hosting plan, the websites, and the app insights that we have here. But if you look like other warnings, right? The property name is not allowed. Really, like we don't need that. I would completely skip, and then at a later stage we can validate if that's valid or not, because there's another step where we check that. In general, like I like my tags at the bottom. I put like I kind of also try tidying up things. When I look in here, like first thing I see is that oh, this is pretty bad. Like it's hidden related. We can just remove it. Like there's like some sort of I would say garbage, but things internal things that we don't need. Right? This like name is not allowed. So I'm gonna remove. Then I'm gonna come back to this, the re renaming, right? But let's see like this one. Oops, we have this hidden link as well that I prefer not having it. Oh, going back, I forgot to change the tags. In general, the tags are like at the bottom. In here, the tags, well, they're not going to go at the bottom because we have a depends on. And for me, it's clear that depends. We have a dependency on another object when I put at the bottom, but then it comes like with the tags. When you look in here, the properties, right? Uh, it says in here the specify object declaration is missing the following required properties. Application type. Let's change that. Let's put like application type. And it shows me like the options, right? So web. What about the application ID? Is not allowed. Okay, it's not allowed. It's gonna go. Right? So we have like this warning. Right? I think like the third step is looking at the variables, how we're naming those variables. They don't look great. Like in general, like with the best practices on Bicep, you leverage lowercase, like kind of a camel case base, right? Where it starts with lowercase and then we have capital letters, right? That's camel. And what I'm gonna do in here, like I'm gonna start renaming this. That doesn't seem good. I'm seeing like just website name, not website name var. I'm replacing everywhere. We have like a conflict in here that came up because this is was specified as a variable, but this is a resource. So we have like an error in here. It says like it was declared multiple times. I'm gonna rename this one to, let me change app web. Oops, let me try one more thing here. Yes, I'm gonna revert that because I'm gonna fall into a trap in here. Let me remove that. I'm gonna do it again, but I'm gonna look at which ones I'm gonna change. I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna change this as well. Right. The name, I didn't change that. All right, the website name, that's a resource. And this is the resource. Let me change this one to app. I'm going to call app web. All right? And this is what's dependable on. So we have the resource, and that's the resource that application sites depends on. So I think like if you just replace straight away, you could just fall like in a place where like things are not going to work. You would feel trapped. So just undo and go back. Right? So with that, we have like name convention here. Also, it doesn't seem great, but you can see we have like other references. So in general, like what I do is just, I'm gonna call hosting plan only. Host plan name. I think this one should be okay. Just host plan, because like if I put plan name, kind of it's confused. It just depends on how you adopt your nomenclature. Because in here I'm not calling app web name, I'm gonna call hosting plan. Let me replace that and replace that. Right. Okay, we're getting nearly there. This one, it's complaining that, oh, it's complaining about like that's missing a property, right? The resource kind. So I'm gonna specify kind in here because it's asking me to do it. Oops. This one, it's also web. I know because, uh, well, Visual Studio doesn't suggest that. But when you look at the resources that get deployed on Azure, you see that what you have in there uses that. So that's why I remember. So there are some things in here that you're not gonna get from IntelliSense. So you need to Google that and check like what would be required. In theory, I don't have any more errors, but this name here is also not great, right? I'm gonna call application sites web, right? So when I do that, like in theory, it looks like initial migration, right? The other step we would have would be creating modules, right? And with modules, I think like there is a principle that's, I, well, in general, like I always use that principle to help me create components, right? Which is the common closure principle. If you haven't heard about that, so on the Clean Architecture book from Robert Martin, you have that definition. And what it says is that the, well, you gather together the into components, the classes, right? It says the class because we're looking at object oriented, but it says you gather together components where the classes that change at the same, well, they change for the same reasons at the same time, and you separate into different components the classes that change at different times for different reasons, right? I'm going to repeat that. So you gather together the components, the classes that change for the same reasons at the same time, and you split the component into components, the classes that change at different times for different reasons. So what it says is that if you have like common behavior, right, depend things that depend on each other, put them together, right? In here we have like pretty disconnected templates, right? But there could be cases where you have like VMs and things that, and you have like other objects that depend on that. And perhaps by changing the, let's say a parent, like could be a definition for a VM, and you could have like other children objects that depend on that. So they wouldn't, it wouldn't make sense to split those children components, right, into separate modules. So it makes more sense to kind of have like them together. I think like with the module, we need always to keep in mind, like if I change one component, one module, do I need to change the other? If you design that way, that wouldn't be correct, right? So you need to try minimizing changes to one single module. I'm not gonna go like in details on the module. There are other sessions on this on the global Azure event that talk like more like advanced Bicep implementation, right? But in here, like to have a look, like that was the initial uh, Bicep template. If I was to run, there is a command that we can run to verify if that's valid or not, right? Because then you would just review your implementation. And just grab like the command that I have available because that one I'm gonna go like across that and we're gonna run together. And if I was to go in here, right? So there's this command, it's bicep build, and this new file is Azure deploy. Uh, no, not that demo, right? We can run that's saved and see what we get from it because that's more like a validation, right? That we can see what's wrong or not. We have some warnings, right? They don't say if that's like a blocker. If we had like errors, we'd have like red uh, displays in here. Apparently, so far, this is okay. Right? I think with that, I kind of stepped onto the refactor phase, but let's go like through the slides and then you can see the steps, right? And you're gonna compare to what I have done so far. Let me go back to this one. So where like we talk about the migration, and when we go now to the refactory, right? So we want like to improve the quality of our Bicep code. First thing that I started, I reviewed the resource API versions that comes with 10 license on Visual Studio Code. Right? First thing you need to do it. Make sure you leverage the latest. Unless you know for sure the implementation of a particular API and you want to use that. But my recommendation, take the latest. Right? Link is there as well. You're gonna review like the linter suggestions as we did. Right? So we're just like checking, well, what is it telling me? There was like the resource group location. We need to create like a parameter for that, and we did it. Right? The other check, we need to revise parameters, variables, symbolic names. So for those, there is um, an article that Microsoft provides, very comprehensive, and has like suggestions and practices on how you can adopt for your Bicep templates. Right? I mentioned about the variables being lowercase, camel case, and that's one of those. There's more, right? So have a look. The link is also at the bottom here. We could end up in case where we would need to simplify expressions. Right? This one, for example, there was a case where I had like concatenation. Right? And linter says, okay, combines like concat combines multiple string, integer, but it says uses string interpolation. So it's a new way of doing that, best practice. So depending on your templates, you could end up with that. So uh, just have in mind that you need to simplify expressions as well. All right, so child, parent child, or extension resource. Um, this is like a topic that's very comprehensive. For this one, in general, you get um, in case where you have parent children, where you have like references with, well, you've probably seen it, where you're concatenating strings with like a resource or a subscription, then slash resource slash your objects. Those are the sort of uh, uh, resources you need to review because some case they are going to use concatenation. You need to replace with interpolation. Sometimes you're going to leverage. So if you guys remember, there was like my case depends on. I had the object itself, right? So what those resource mentions that you leverage those reference to resource rather than concatenate strings, right? So documentations are very comprehensive on that, and definitely have a look. It depends on how you implement your original ARM template. Right. Create modules, right? As I said, modules are individual components that have the same sort of, they have like specific responsibilities. And if things belong together, you live together. If not, split them. This is an example that for the hosting plan, I called app plan, right? App plan bicep. And within this separate bicep file, I have the implementation of the resource. And in here, I'm just accepting parameters. They're being passing from the, let's say, the main bicep that kind of connects multiple modules and passing to the modules itself themselves, right? And that's how like you would do, like you would create like different files and work with modules on that, right? The links there. You can always add like comments and descriptions. You have different ways using like the double bar or bar asterisk, right? Or even like using like a tag, like at description to specify like what the purpose of the variable, right, or the resource. You can do that to make like this intelligible for other developers, right? Or the or on your team, right? Just to help with understanding. Follow by best practice. I think like by going here on this article, it kind of provides you uh, a full like um, I would say article that contains tips, right, and guidance on how to do things the proper way. And at the end of the day, right, after you get to your final templates, you're gonna run the commands I showed to see if things are still working or not. And then you could just take a decision. All right, I need to modify my templates or adjust because that's not working. Right? I can run like the same commands. I'm gonna run like this one just soon with like the other phase. I'm gonna run one to the converted one, right? That we have like in our example here. Then we have the test, right? So this is the phase where we're gonna verify the integrity of the templates. And we're gonna perform a test deployment. And in here, it's an interesting check, right? Because you're gonna run like the template, the these commands against release or what was deployed with your ARM template, right? So you're not gonna run because you need to compare. This is where we're gonna compare. So first step, you deploy your ARM template, right? Or you're gonna, if you're migrating, you probably have like already a test environment. Grab that because that was deployed with the ARM. And then what you're gonna do is just to test the bicep. And you're not gonna release on top of that, but you're gonna run this command. What if that's gonna check? It's gonna do a comparison with the new bicep template against what was deployed with the ARM template. And you're gonna get some findings from there. And then you take a decision. Good, it's gonna be like a smooth uh, release, or if things are too, they're like too drastic changes, then you need to validate if that's going to be the case for you. Right? Perform a test deployment. That's what we need to do. Right? The link here is down there. I'm gonna show like how we can achieve that. And I want to share like bring like an article that I have created because it contains like the commands, right, that we're gonna be exploring here. Uh, so basically, like this article here, it's there are like different parts of it. On part 4, that's where we're doing like the test. But what I'm doing here, I just created a resource group just for testing purpose. But in here, I provision the templates using the JSON, right? So that was my ARM template. I provision that. That's in Azure at the moment. What I need to run this what if, right? It's a deployment that contains the what if, and it's gonna leverage my Bicep file. Right? I'm using like taking as a parameter the development environment JSON, right? And if I go to my Visual Studio Code, let me bring that one, right? So I don't think I showed like the parameters file, but that's the same. Those things don't need to change. You can just keep them the way they are. Because when you're releasing, you could use like this parameter dev or for the environment that you have and combine that with um, your bicep, right? And that's what I'm doing on that on the article. I'm just saying, okay, I'm going to use that bicep file that contain the parameters coming from my dev JSON file. If you look like the bicep one that was converted after refactoring, you're gonna see they have like modules, right? And it's just a little bit more like tied up. And but you can look in here that I have this kind of my main bicep that contains references in the modules. So if I look at these modules, right? So they have the implementation. I put like descriptions. You just kind of decorate the way you feel like that's more intelligible to you. But I have like things in here like description. I'm using outputs, so I can just reuse the variables back like to the main bicep. Uh, but yeah, and I receive the parameters. Right? Same for the apps, which is my web app. I mentioned about the components. Right? One depending, well, things that work together, they should be together. And I did that with the app web. We have like a app web config. The is the configuration tab, right, for web apps on Azure. I'm specifying like some variables like ASP.NET Core environment. I put like application sites, right? So those variables that come from the modules, they are being inserted in here, right? So the app insights. So I have like an output because I'm outputting like the app insights and embedding that output with the ID instrumentation key onto the web app. So I'm using like that sort of concept with components, having them together. One depends on the other, right? Um, that's like an example of like a resource, right, where we have a child. So that's the sort of thing that I was mentioning in one of the steps that like I have like the website slash web. Right? In this case, I need to use the concatenation. In other case, I would need to use the object itself. So that's what we have in here. What I can do, let me just run the command that we had run here before. Let's see, let me go like to the converted folder and let me run against the bicep I have in there. Let me just see the command was in here before uh, in the bicep. Let's run that and see. You're gonna notice as I run here, I'm gonna have like a JSON file created. So just keep an eye and let's see if we get like warnings on that. Wow, no warnings. All right, so this is pretty good to go. All right, and you can see that the JSON file was generated in here. But that looks like similar to the original one. Yes, the Bicep files are kind of like on that check, they convert into JSON to validate if that was created correctly or not. So we have that. I'm gonna remove that. I don't want this onto my folder. And what we can do now is to run the comparison. I have previously connected to my Azure tenant. So I have like the instance in here connected. I'm gonna come like to the article. Let me copy what I have in here. Right. And we're gonna run other steps in here. I'm gonna explain in details what it means. But let's run like the first one. All right, right. So I'm saying, okay, created like a deployment that contains this what if on this resource group using the my bicep file, template file with these parameters file. And this is gonna check against Azure resource, right? Let's see, hope that one is quick, but my resources are on Azure at the moment. And this one is gonna check against what's available in there. Okay, it has started, it's running. So we're gonna get like warnings, right? And I'm gonna show like after we have like results, but we have different modes by specifying. So we got like the response. And one of the things in here like to notice is that we have removed like that hidden link, right? Remember? So it shows like that was deleted, created, modified, or ignored. So it's showing, okay, that was removed, okay, right? So it's telling me what's changed. I'm happy with that. Uh, there are things that's being included, flow type, request resource. I kind of refactor in a way that I change the tags as well. I change the tags to be for like environments in a different way. You can look like the at the template later, but it's telling me like those things that have been included, right? And things in here like to ignore, right? Well, just like in it doesn't it shows in here like internal objects that it's not gonna do anything with like what's in there at the moment. But what's showing me here, it's there are two modes. There's like the incremental modes, and there is the complete mode. What it means? So by default, when I run just the what if comparison, it checks the resource using the incremental mode. And what it means is that if you have resources that need to be deleted, right, and they like they have drastically changed, if you run the incremental, you're not gonna get that because the resource is already deployed on Azure. It's gonna check only the delta, right? But it's not gonna reveal like let's say the web app itself. It's just like few parameters that just additionals, and that's what it's doing here. It's just taking me the delta. But if you want to check like the completion, check, right? Let me bring again the UI, the article here. All right, so there are like two ways of doing. Well, that's what I did, the what if, that shows me the incremental, which is pretty much what we have in here, like the mode incremental. But it's just there, like you're not specifying. If you want to specify, which is what I'm doing and what you should do as well. So you want to verify things are not gonna get corrupt. You want things like still to work. What it changed? It changed that I put a mode. specifying the mode that this is complete. If you don't do it by default, it comes with that incremental. And there is like a little bit different in here. I just want a confirmation with the what if, right? Because I could go in there now and perform. I want to change that, right? And for all of the resource, you need to do like that. Make sure you run the complete mode. Otherwise, you could have like surprise of things not being replaced, right, in your resource on Azure. So that's running at the moment. I just see, but you're gonna be impressed that it shows like much more. All right. And at the bottom here, I have like, do you want to execute that? Uh, So that's where like you decide if you want to override what's in there or not. So it's showing me here like things are changing. Are they breaking changes? I don't know. To be honest, that's your call. So you're gonna verify if things in here make sense or not. But there could be things that would be critical for your resource that you know, and if they get changed, they would break like your uh, solution. You would corrupt your Azure resource, right? In here for me, like it's just like a web app. It's just replacing some names. Those things on the incremental, they would be ignored. But in here, the complete mode reinforces, right? So reapplies what's in there. There are some things in here, so it's kind of deleting what's in there and reapplying. So could be a way of corrupting on your resource if there are things that are not correct. Right? I think like for the sake of the example, I'm gonna do it, but I'm not really gonna go like onto the resource on Azure. But it's just like demoing that you can use like the what if operator, right? To validate. And now I'm applying the bicep against the Azure resource that was provisioned with the ARM template. Right? Let's consider this like your test environment. So you're doing that and you are sure things are gonna work. All right, I'm gonna leave in there. If you have like by the end, we should just have like the conclusion of that. If that comes soon, I show. Otherwise, that's kind of part of what you need to do. Let's just continue on the presentation. We have like just like the last phase where now that you have validated in the test environment, you're going to go production. But are you going production? Are you going to if you're running like the what if operator, it means that you're going to override the existing resource. Do you need to do that? If not, maybe provision a new resource, and then you remap whatever like the you just do redo like the binaries release to the new instance. That will be the best of scenarios, right? Yeah, but there are cases where you need to do in place release. But even for that, like you need to prepare like for a rollback plan. What you're gonna do, perhaps like you're gonna delete, reprovision with the previous ARM templates, right? And reprovision the binaries. You need to take into consideration, do like a proper mapping for that, or of the steps for you to roll back, right? You can run like the what if operator in production if you're doing like in place upgrades, right? So do that as well. Maybe it's a legacy environment and they don't have the same uh, resource, or they have like different things. Right? Maybe people have manually changed the resource on Azure rather than leveraging like pipelines to do it for you. So you need to verify in production as well. Rule of the thumb: do like a manual deployment. Right? So do that first for production, and then you can take like on pipelines. So nothing wrong with that, but just get it first done by leveraging commandlets, right? And then you do it through Azure DevOps or any other automated way. Make sure that in the end, you run smoke tests, right? So if you have a website, check like if the content still works, or maybe you need to do like a new binary release to fix things. But I think like it's just a healthy way of making sure that things work, right? And with that, uh, that's like the link to the resource, like on phase 5. With that, we're pretty much there with the demo. And let me check in here if like how things went. Yeah, so you can see in here that my resources were updated, right, entirely, and that worked, right? So that was deployed. Next step for me would be to validate like the binaries are working there. In my case in here, I don't have any binaries available. Let me see here like questions, right? I think like some people. I'll have David. Hi, David. So when renaming symbolic names or param vars, you can use F2 or right-click rename symbol, and it will also rename the reference instead of find and replace. Nice, good tip. Yeah. I think like for more, if you have like been doing like bicep in more environments with more solutions, yeah, that's a great tip. Definitely gonna take it. We have like if you don't have like any other um, comments, I'd like just to thank you just for joining the session. There will be like more sessions of the global Azure events and also like on coding nights as well. And I invite you to come and see. This was like a DevOps one, but we go heavily uh, on .NET implementations and design patterns, right, and best practices. And you can see like the previous sessions we had on on YouTube channel, right? Thank you, thank you, Minju. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'll catch up uh, on Saturday, right, where we have like functions, and we're going to have another session where I'm presenting, and we're going to be talking about professional real world Azure functions. So I see you there. Oh, good night, and catch up soon. Bye.